بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. So before we start, just one programming note for next week. We will start inshallah promptly at 6:45. 6:45. That would be 6:45. 15 minutes before 7. Promptly.
Is that Egyptian time?
Maybe I'm saying that for your benefit. So that would give us hopefully 45 minutes before the adhan for Maghrib. So that way, inshallah, we'll finish right at the adhan of Isha or a little before it. So we don't keep you too long here, inshallah. So last week, I think we left off. We read everything up until page 35, for those of you with the text, if I'm not mistaken. Did we do the 10th one? We did not. Okay. I stand corrected. So Imam al-Bukhari narrates this hadith تعليقا وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من يرد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين وإنما العلم بالتعلم. Yeah, I think we sort of talked about it in the previous one because it was a similar wording, but that's okay. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever Allah wills good for, He grants him understanding in religion, and knowledge only comes from learning. So when we say that Imam Bukhari narrates this ta'liqan, يعني علق الحديث, means he left it without a chain of transmission. You notice in all the other ones, he will at least mention the Sahabi that he narrates upon. Here he says directly, وَقَالَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So since Imam Bukhari did not live at the same time as the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he didn't actually hear him say it, obviously. But he is mentioning it without an isnad because he doesn't have an isnad that he believes will fall under the criteria that he usually has for all of the other hadith in the Sahih. And one of the things about Imam Bukhari, he was the most stringent of the hadith narrators in the criteria that he held for the narrators. So not only did they have to have been contemporaneous, living in the same time, but also there has to have been proof that one transmitter from the next actually met and heard from that person. Imam Muslim doesn't have that criteria. Imam Muslim only that they lived during the same time. And his hadith is also considered sahih. So whenever Imam Bukhari doesn't find a hadith that doesn't fall under that isnad criteria, he will include it if he believes that the meaning is true and that there may be other asanid, but not to the level that he is desirous of in the rest of his sahih. And other ulama have found a chain of transmission for this hadith, I believe. He did include part of it in إنما العلم بالتعلم. He did include in another narration with an isnad, and I think some of the other ulama also, but it doesn't say here which ones that I'm aware of. Because this was actually in the next hadith is the same thing too, actually. Both of them are ta'liq, yani. So sometimes he puts them in the chapter heading to indicate the sort of a subtext for the meaning of the heading. So this is from Bab al-Ilm, or the chapter dealing with knowledge. And so he prefaces it with this hadith, مَنْ يُرِدِ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. So whenever Allah is desirous of good for someone, He gives them understanding, here translated understanding in religion, and fiqh. And we went over some of this last week. But There's a couple of different ways that can be interpreted here, and they're all valid. In terms of fiqh, understanding, in terms of deen. The most obvious one that is most often quoted is that one is given knowledge in the understanding of the particulars of the application of the deen, like legal rulings, fiqh, as we use today, to denote al-ahkam الشرعية المستنبطة بأدلة تفصيلية كذا, the definition that they give, namely the legal rulings that are derived from the primary sources of the Quran and Sunnah, and that are connected المتعلقة بأفعال العباد or مكلفين, that are connected with or referring to the acts and deeds of those who are morally and legally responsible. So that's technically like the technical definition of fiqh. So not only does it talk about how many times you pray in the day and how many rak'ahs and what surah you should read, but also halal and haram, should this act, is it valid, invalid, so forth. All of that comes under the rubric of fiqh fi din, understanding of those legal rulings. And obviously that's a meaning, but we should also keep in mind that the terminology of fiqh, as I just mentioned, was not something that was circumscribed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So they didn't use it merely in that meaning. And so when they referred to fuqaha, they not only meant those who understand the legal rulings, but also al-fiqhu anillah, which means understanding Allah, in a sense, or understanding the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a different type of understanding. So someone may have an understanding of how to apply particular rulings to know halal and haram, but if they are encountered with something adverse in their circumstances, in their life, they don't know how to deal with that. That aspect would be called al-fiqhu anillah. So having understanding of deen as it terms to not just mu'amala between Muslims and other Muslims, or Muslims and other non-Muslims and so forth, but also how is it that I deal with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His qada and qadar? How do I understand the wisdom behind His actions? How is it that I can see that everything has a wisdom behind it, even though it may not be apparent to me? So this is, I would say, a finer form understanding of fiqh. And it might even be the one that is more applicable in this particular hadith. مَنْ يُرِدْ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. So it said anyone, anytime that Allah wants good for the, doesn't say whom, it says anyone, it's left open, then He gives them, Azza wa Jal, an understanding not only in the deen, but of the deen and how to apply the deen. In other words, a complete way of understanding the deen. That means that if you are understanding of only particular aspects of the deen, right, or applying only particular aspects, and other aspects you are not, you don't really have fiqh. You don't really have an understanding, because any understanding will be a complete understanding. And one of the dangerous things that applies especially to religion is that if you have only a partial understanding, it might be more dangerous than if you didn't understand at all. Because when you have a partial understanding, then you're left with the impression that you kind of do understand, but in reality you may not, right? And that's ignorance, or even a compound ignorance. So if you think you understand and you really don't, that's kind of, they call it ad-da' al-udal, the incurable disease. Because how can you teach someone who doesn't feel that they need to be taught? They've already arrived, they understand everything. That brings into the second part of the prophetic report, وَإِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. Right? So here it's saying, how do you go about getting, what are the keys to opening that understanding? It's with ta'allum. This too can understand in one of two ways. Ta'allum could mean the process of learning. In other words, that you gain this knowledge from a teacher, because there's two types of knowledges or sources of knowledge from that aspect. Either what you gain from the teacher, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a direct sort of knowledge in your heart. as referred to in the ayah, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Have fear of Allah and taqwa of Him, and He will teach you. وَيُعَلِّمُكُمْ. Allah will put that knowledge in your heart. So it may not necessarily need a teacher. And there have been people who have sort of known things about very fine particulars about the deen and about legal rulings, and they never had a teacher. But Allah put the meanings in their heart nevertheless. So it is possible, it's not from the impossible. But the normal course of things is that the keys to such knowledge, one is taqwa, obviously, having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, obeying Him in deed and in speech, and in the activities of your heart, which is mainly belief, your atiqadat, what you believe, what you hold to be true. Then this is a key to opening that ilm al-ladunni, or that direct knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also to have the basic understanding that you can gain from a teacher. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. So, which one is left out, as we said last week? The kind of self-didactic, trying to teach yourself, may not be the key to that. And in fact, that's oftentimes when people are left with an impression they have knowledge, even in a partial sense, and they really don't. There used to be a time when these books would never even be approached unless one had read them with a teacher initially, or had some of the requisite prerequisite disciplines in order to read it. It would be, if our predecessors knew that people would open up Sahih al-Bukhari like this and then just read the English translation or the Russian translation or the Malay translation and start talking about it just like that, they would be dumbfounded. They would be, how can that even possibly be? Because we don't even approach it in its original Arabic and do that. So how can people even take it in translation and then have this piecemeal understanding of religion that they, and then not only that, they claim it for themselves, and they urge others to follow in the same way. And that leads to a type of chaos and anarchy within the understanding of the scripture of Islam or religion in general. So that doesn't mean there's like evil oligarchy of scholars at the top, and they're kind of the gatekeepers, and in order to have communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need to go through them. There is no clergy in Islam. It's not a clerical elite. But what it is are those who have preserved the methodologies by which we understand how to approach the Quran and Sunnah. But once you understand those methodologies, once you have some of it, the path between you and Allah is open. And it's always an intimate path. You don't need someone else to show you exactly how to go about doing it. They might show you the way, but they're not going to push you towards that way. They'll show you where it is, but you have to go seek it. You have to go follow it. So the ta'allum means there has to be a teacher. And there are certain things that one can only gain from a teacher. And then that's with the understanding that this tradition is a transmitted one. Right? The reason behind isnad is that you have to understand where it's coming from. That there is a chain of transmission going back to the scholar who wrote the book or the Prophet ﷺ, and so you know the authenticity of that which you are reading, right? Because as we said before, there is no system that I'm aware of that has a more rigorous system of authentication in terms of putting the criteria for the validity of a claim statement like a hadith, true or false, than the hadith sciences. Even modern historians, they piece together things. They do not have direct, reliable asanid or chains of transmission going back to particular things. It's a rare thing to find that. But here we have hundreds, if not thousands, of a hadith that have been rigorously authenticated this way. So they form the underpinning of our understanding of the religion. But the methodology by which you approach it, right, has also been transmitted and preserved, but you can't really take part in it unless you deal with a live teacher who has that same isnad chain going back to his teacher, and then his or her teacher before that, and so on. Otherwise it becomes cut off. And if you take merely the text without the teacher, and you're just reading the words without knowing the context of the words, this is what leads people to to a great and unacceptable amount of error. So, like for example, I don't know if it's true or not, but it was circulating around that there was a fatwa in one of the Arab countries that the so-called mufti, wherever he was, I don't know what he was, he said that it's impermissible for women to drive cars because they might be driving to their lover, their ashiq. So his reasoning was, we have to stop them from driving cars because they're going to take the car and do illicit things to where they drive. The principle that he tried to use here is something that is sound, the principle, namely something called sadd al-dhari'a, which means that you prevent something that's normally halal in order to prevent a haram. Like what? Like we would say that you should not dig a well or dig a hole where people will be walking back and forth. Digging a well or digging a hole normally is permissible, right? But if you do it in a place where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, then a greater harm can come about, namely someone could fall into that. So we would tell them, go dig that somewhere else, not here, even though normally digging such a thing is allowed. But what's the difference between these two? Is the application of that principle. One of the important aspects of that is that you have to have a certain level of certainty that whatever you're trying to prevent will actually happen. Right? It can't be delusional. So the wasila itself, it has to be sound in that it will lead to A will lead to B. A certain level of certainty. And then to apply that also means there's a certain level of understanding on the part of the faqih or the scholar who's doing that. This guy, he took that principle, but he used it in a faulty way, in my opinion. Why? Because A does not necessarily lead to B, and then he made it exclusive for women. Why can't the man drive to his illicit lover too? What difference is there between the two? How is that? And driving a car, no one can say that driving a car just by itself is haram. It's not possible. Because all is a mode of transportation from one place to the next, and no one can make that haram. So it's a means, but if there's a preponderance of certainty that it will lead to something, or invariably it will lead to something haram, then we can start talking about whether we should say that thing is haram or not. But he misapplied this because he's not a person of knowledge, he's not a person of isnad, he didn't study with teachers who are reliable or authentic, and so he read whatever he read and just kind of figured it out in his head and then said, this is the way it should be. I think that's what happened. So even this is how a little bit of knowledge can be very dangerous if it's not applied in the right way. And the other meaning that I point out lastly in this particular hadith, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ, also means that knowledge can be sought, right? Or knowledge is a maqam, it's a state. One of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim, the omniscient, the one who knows everything. So someone who has knowledge means that they're only partaking in something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them to begin with. So ultimately we believe that all knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we'll see in the next hadith, He is the one who gives. And that means true knowledge can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means that Allah can give it to you or He cannot give it to you. That also means that knowledge is just not memorization of facts. Like many of the ulama said, knowledge is not just riwayah, kathat riwayah, knowing many hadith or memorizing, but it's a light put in the heart. So if it's a light, that means if you're not in that state, then struggle to try to get to that state. Right? Because it's not about books or knowledge. Our predecessors, the ancients, the pre-moderns, they didn't have huge libraries. Right? They didn't have libraries with 3 million volumes in their stacks. That didn't happen until centuries later. But yet we believe that they were the most pious people. So it's not how much that they memorized, how much that they knew, but it was their application of that knowledge and then Allah putting that light in their heart. So they become munir, right? They become people who not only reflect the light of God, but they can also reflect it, or I should say refract it, to other people. Then we say, Fulan alim. We can say that person is a person of knowledge. But if it's just mere, rolling off of facts or hadith, that's not really knowledge. So the next one we did last week, I remember, من سلك طريقا يطلب به علما سهل طريقا إلى الجنة, which I don't think is included in your packet, but we did, I believe, talk about it. So the one after that, which has an isnad, عن ابن شهاب قال حميد بن عبد الرحمن سمعت معوية خطيبا يقول سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من يرد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين وإنما أنا القاسم والله يعطي ولن تزال هذه الأمة قائمة على أمر الله لا يضرهم من خالفهم حتى يأتي أمر الله. So Ibn Shihab said, Humayd ibn Rahman said, I heard Muawiyah giving a khutbah or a sermon saying he heard the Prophet say, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whatever Allah wills good for, He grants him understanding in religion. I only apportion, Allah gives. This ummah will continuously be upholding the commandment of Allah, unharmed by those who oppose them, until the order of Allah comes. So the first part is very similar. In fact, it's the same to the part before, so we don't need to go over that. But the second part, وَإِنَّمَا أَنَا قَاسِمٌ وَاللَّهُ يُعْطِي. So the Prophet ﷺ, he is the Qasim, and al-Qisma means the one who makes, who distributes, or who decides how things are to be divided up. Usually it's used when we talk about the division of one's estate after they're deceased, that they will decide, what are the shares of inheritance, and so it's not really their estate they're dividing, they're just the executor of that estate. So whoever is the executor of that estate, they figure out what each portion is, and they're the ones who then distribute it to the rightful heirs. So the Prophet ﷺ compared himself to such a person, that he is not the true giver, because he said, Allahu yu'ati, Allah is the one who truly gives, but he is the one who distributes or apportions. But even in that, there's a great sharaf, there's a great honor for the Prophet ﷺ, because imagine Allah has designated you, really the sole person in humanity, to be the apportioner of Allah's favors and bestowals. So you can infer from this hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored Muhammad ﷺ above all other in creation, and that He made him the apportioner, He made him the distributor of the khair, of the good. Right? Because He didn't say what He apportions or what He distributes. So when it's not mentioned, it means it's general. So anything of good, anything of knowledge, in fact anything of mercy, good, knowledge, blessing, ultimately it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but via the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All that we know about Allah is from whom? It's from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All that the hadith came from whom? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran itself was first revealed for us in the earth on the lips of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So all of that khair, all of that good came from him. And that's why it behooves us to not just realize that, but also to realize that his sunnah, his way of living as well, reflects that he is that qasim, that he is the one who distributes all of this. Right? It should never come out of our lips that we say, well, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was just the messenger. Just? What do you mean just the messenger? He wasn't the mailman who delivered the mail and then he went home. That's not what he is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He did more than that. He still continues to do more than that. The Prophet ﷺ sees what we do. Some people get all excited. What do you mean sees what we do? Isn't he dead? Not in that sense, right? Because he said to the Sahaba, Hayati khayrun lakum wa mati khayrun lakum. My life is better for you, as is my death is better for you when it comes. تُعْرَضَ عَلَيَّ أَعْمَالُكُمْ. I see your deeds are brought before me. So that means in life and in death. فَإِن وَجَدْتُ خَيْرًا حَمِدْتُ اللَّهِ. If I find good, I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِن وَجَدْتُ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ أَوْ شَرًّا اسْتَغْفَرْتُ لَكُمْ رَبَّكُمْ. And if I find something else than this, that may be of evil, then I ask Allah to forgive you. وَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَالرَّسُولُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Right? That's Quran, it's not even Hadith. Allah will see your deeds, as will the Prophet, the Messenger, and the believers eventually. So his role as Qasim, right? And that's why some of the Hadith, his laqab or his nickname was Abu al-Qasim, the father of Qasim. He didn't really have a son called Qasim, but it may be referring back to this. And that's why, because the Arabs, they'll say Abu something, if not that they have a son or daughter with that name, but it's an attribute of theirs, right? Or sometimes as a muda'aba, as like a nickname. So people used to be called Abu al-Ma'ali, Abu al-Khair, so forth. The father of good, Abu al-Barakat, right? The one who is the father of blessings. They don't have a child named Barakat, but the Barakat is attributed to them, affiliated with them. So this idea of qisma is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, and that's why in some of the hadith he forbade, he said you can call or name my name, but don't name with my laqab. Don't call anyone else Abu al-Qasim, right? Because he says here, innama ana Qasim. I am the one who's Qasim, not anybody else. Wallahu yu'ati. And Allah is the one who gives. So that means, as he prefaced that with knowledge, or with fiqh fi deen, understanding the deen, that means also as one sees themselves on a journey and that they are progressing to a greater understanding of deen, know that this will only happen by tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then you might ask, well then if it's not something that has really to do with me, then how do I go about getting it? The way you go about getting it is tahqiq al-ubudiyyah, is to completely realize and do and understand your servitude, and I would even say slavehood, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to no one else. That means that as a slave, you humble yourself before God, before Allah. There's no reason to be arrogant, even if Allah gives you, access to some of the inner divine secrets. You still should remain a humble servant. So the more that you realize this ubudiyyah, right, that you are a slave and you implement that in your life, then the higher Allah will elevate you in rank in the other world and in this world as well. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the Prophet ﷺ in his highest maqam, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi, right? Subhanallah to the one who took his abd, his slave, on the night journey, which was the Isra and the Mi'raj, right? When he entered into and he saw some of the aspects of heaven, and he went as far as the Sidratul Muntaha, the farthest lote tree, and beyond, a place where even the Archangel Jibreel couldn't follow him, where he went by himself. And how was he described? He was described as a slave, right? And that very same night, when he was given the choice, would you rather be a prophet king or a prophet slave? And he said, I'd rather be a prophet slave. Not a slave to any human being, but a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So kingdom over other human beings is not an elevation in rank, but slavehood only to the true creator, namely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a true rank, that's a true elevation in rank. So once one realizes that and realizes their ubudiyyah, this will reflect in their interaction with everybody else. Because everyone else is a slave like you. Everyone else is a slave like you. So why would you feel like you're superior to them? They are ibad, amthalukum. Then the next part of the hadith. ولن تزال هذه الأمة قائمة على أمر الله لا يضرهم من خالفهم حتى يأتي أمر الله. This ummah, actually that's a mistranslation. That's a very bad mistranslation. Does it say ummah or طائفة من هذه الأمة? Okay, that's another narration. There's another narration of this that says طائفة من هذه الأمة, which means a part of this ummah, which would give us an insight into what's meant in this hadith. And the way that it's phrased, لن تزال هذه الأمة. It will always remain that this ummah, or some of this ummah, will always be upholding truth, or will be upholding the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that means that if it will always be this way, and the Prophet ﷺ is affirming this, then that means there's reason to believe that that's not the case. Or there will be events happening around us that may lend you to believe that may not be the case. Why else would the Prophet ﷺ mention this and emphasize this? And if you read this with the other ahadith dealing with the one that's going to come a little bit later about knowledge being taken from the ummah, in addition to the ahadith about the signs of the Day of Judgment, you will come to the conclusion there will come times when it will seem like there is no deen, and there's no people of deen, and there's no knowledge, and there is nothing. And oftentimes we in our modern times, we feel this way. Like, what are you talking about? Where is Islam? Where are the people practicing Islam? So many people claiming to be Muslim, but where is the real Islam? People actually practicing and imbibing the virtues and the characteristics and the meanings of this way of life. But here the Prophet ﷺ assures us there will always be someone from the ummah doing so. So if we take this narration where it says هذه الأمة, it means the real ummah. It means the real people who are really upholding that aspect of the deen. They are qa'im. They are upholding it despite all the adversity, despite all of the difficulty around them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he indicated this. بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا وطوبى للغرباء. Islam began as strange, it will return once again as strange, and طوبى للغرباء. Tuba means heaven or glad tidings, good news to al-ghuraba, the ones who feel strange. And the Quran tells us that this will always be a small group. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَقَلِيلٌ مِنْ عِبَادِيَ الشُّكُورِ. If you follow most of those who are on the face of the earth, they will lead you astray. وَقَلِيلٌ مِنْ عِبَادِيَ الشُّكُورِ. And very few of my ibad are thankful, grateful servants. So one thing we should come to realize is, it became very popular, I think, maybe in the 80s or 70s, like this whole pan-Islam thing that, Islam is eventually going to rule the world and we're number one, and this, how they talk about American exceptionalism. America thinks she's so great and all that. There was this type of feeling too, maybe still is so, that we're Muslims, we're the best, we're great, we're going to rule everything, and everything will come under Islam and so forth. But if you read the hadith and if you read the prophecies, at the end of the day, on a worldly level, we lose. We don't win. When the Day of Judgment comes, when the hour comes, it will only come upon the most wicked of people. Only the most wicked of people. This will be even after the coming of the Antichrist, and then the second coming of Jesus alayhi salam, and the killing of Jesus of the Antichrist, and then there'll be a period of peace and so forth. But even after that, people will go astray again. It will happen again. And then the hour will not come except to the most vile and wicked of people. And that means that the few believers that are there, Allah will, as the hadith mentions, will take their life in a subtle and a gentle way, and everybody else who's left will be the wicked people when the hour actually comes and they'll witness the Day of Judgment. Don't wish for it. We have fanatics out there, not just from our tradition, but other ones who are kind of can't wait for Armageddon, and they have their shelter built underneath their backyard, and they got all these food that they have, and you know, non-perishable things, and they can't wait and they want it to happen, and yeah, let's get it on. Are you crazy? Who wants that? I don't want to be around when that comes around. It'll be the most wicked of times, the most difficult, evil of times. So that means it's not about the numbers, it's not how many people we attract, right? It's about actually embodying what you can do, these virtues, trying to practice it in your life, and then as people see that in you, then they may come to realize this is a way that they may want to adopt as well. You know, this whole idea of da'wah that's based upon numbers, and you know, we're going to establish Islam in every city, and then we'll get these numbers, and then once a critical mass, and then the other word they like to use, the corporate types, synergy, right? We'll synergize, and then we'll really be able to do stuff, change things, and take over. Take over what? Take over what? Prophet ﷺ, he said, I came so that I can perfect the most beautiful and righteous virtues and character traits. That's what he came for. He didn't come to take over the world. There is this, if you read the nusus, if you read the tradition, you will not find this feeling of pan-Islam takeover of the world. It's just not there. Some people claim the Khilafah. You know, we need to revive the Khilafah because then we can really start applying stuff, and you know, once we get the Khilafah back, everything will be good. Guess what? It's been 1400 years, 1432 years since we've had, or 1401, because 30 years. 1401 years, no Khilafah. 1400 years, no Khilafah. Prophet ﷺ, he said, the Khilafah in my ummah will be 30 years. He said it, he prophesied how long it was going to last. And it ended with the Khilafah of Ali, or Sayyidina al-Hasan. It was only 6 months or a year after that. Then he said after that would be a kingdom, which it was. He didn't mention the Khilafah is coming back. There has been no Khilafah, it's not coming back. This idea of a pan-Islamic ruler, Islamic ruler of the whole world, and then even the idea of thinking that that will make everything right, it's not rooted in a deep and contemplative understanding of the Sunni Islamic tradition. It's not there. It's something that came later. In fact, it's something that came, I think, more out of a fusion of ideas from the Enlightenment period in Europe, and some ideas of anarchy, and sort of the modern sort of Marxist movements, and all of these influences came to play, and then people made this idea that we have to be activist enough to kind of take over the world, and then that will be. People don't realize that most of the Muslim world actually became Muslim only a few centuries ago, not from the beginning, and it was not via any type of military campaigns. Not at all. Most of the Eastern Muslim world did not come to Islam like that. And most of the Muslims in Eastern Africa and a lot of West Africa did not come to Islam like that. All of the coastal areas of India, including Madras and the other side where they speak Tamil and so forth, none of those areas came to Islam by a military campaign. There were people who just sailed over there, didn't know what they would find, and they lived there. They lived as Muslims. They didn't have this big map on the wall, and they strategized, well, if we take Delhi, then Calicut, and then we take this city, then we'll have this critical mass. No, they lived their life as Muslims, and they lived virtuous lives, and they lived lives full of character and love for the people that they wanted to invite to Islam. One of the things we lack in da'wah today is we don't really love the people we're trying to invite. We kind of despise them a little bit. We don't really like them, right? We kind of like, yeah, but he's kafir, I don't like him. He's not going to come around. No one is beyond redemption. Allah said about the Prophet ﷺ, لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ means you're like, it's ripping you apart inside. That you're trying to lead these people, and yet they're not following you. They threw, the whole city of Ta'if threw stones at him when he went just to invite them to Islam. Then given the opportunity to lay destruction to them, he refused. And he said, I would hope that from amongst them will come people who will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't have any enmity, rancor in his heart for any of those people. He was always hoping they would come to Islam. Even his staunchest enemies. Right? He said, Ansur al-Islam bi ahad al-umarayn. May Allah help this deen with one of the two Umars. Who were they? Umar ibn al-Khattab, which Allah answered his dua. Who was the other Umar? You know who that was? Abu Jahl. The staunchest enemy of the Prophet ﷺ. But yet the Prophet ﷺ prayed for Islam, and he would see it as a nusra, as an aid for him. Hind bint Utbah arranged for the assassination of Hamza, his most beloved uncle, and not only that, she went to the battlefield and desecrated the body. Then she became Muslim. Did he say, I don't want to see you, go away, I don't accept your Islam? No, he accepted her. And she even went to complain about some family issues, and he spoke to her and he told her what to do, and she became a good Muslim. So it's about living Islam in your life, in your heart, and the people around you will begin to see that it's something that they want to take part of. Not that you want to take over. Believe me, no one is going to come to Islam if they feel like we want to take over. And take over what? Who wants to take over that? There's nothing to take over. So this ummah will always be holding up the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said that the meaning of this is that there will always be good in the world. Until when? حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ. Until the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the amr, which means either the day of judgment, or that time right before the day of judgment, when only the believers, some believers remain, Allah takes their life, and then only the most wicked remain. At that point, there will be no more good in the world. Yani pre-Armageddon, right there, no more good. But there will always be some good in the world until that time, even though it may be hard to find. So that means there will always be people who are people of good, people of khair, people of charity, people of honesty, of truthhood, of knowledge. We will always have people who will know how to recite the Quran properly. We'll always have people who know how to transmit the hadith. We'll always have people who know the fiqh and can teach people. The numbers may dwindle. Hadith doesn't say that's not going to happen. That may in fact be true, and it may be that for every 1,000 or 100,000 or whatever, people can only find a few amongst their midst, but nevertheless, there will always be people who can do that. So the khair is qa'im, it will always be there. لا يضرهم من خالفهم. They will not be harmed by those who oppose them. That means there will be those who oppose them, right? So you make the inference that there has to be opposition to this. So there are always going to be those people around, and at the same time, there will be opposition. That means if you want to be amongst that ummah, the true ummah that's upholding the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the command of Allah, then expect opposition. Expect mukhalafa. Expect resistance. It's the sunnah of life. When the Prophet ﷺ, as we read in the first hadith, went to Waraqah, and Waraqah said to him, لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ مَعَكَ إِذْ يُخْرِجُكَ قَوْمُكَ. I wish I would be with you when your people will exile you. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أَوَ مُخْرَجِيَهُ. They're going to exile me? I thought, everybody puts their valuables with me. أَنَا الصَّادِقِ الْأَمِينَ. People trust me and love me. And he said, no one has come with what you have come with, except that this is how it ends. They will try to exile him. And all of the prophets before him went through the same thing. Some of them saying to their people, أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. Is there not even one guided man amongst all of you? Can you all not see this? Nuh alayhi salam, 950 years in da'wah. 950 years. How many people did he get to follow him? Some say 13, 20, along those lines. Yeah, less than 50. less than 50 people, over 950 years, followed him, alayhi salam. So this opposition is going to be there. But the bishara, the good news in this hadith, لا يضرهم من خالفهم. They will not be hurt by those who oppose them. Now, not hurt by them doesn't mean necessarily not injured in maybe even a physical way, but their amal, their deeds will still hold that value. Their words will still hold that value as long as they're upholding this. They can't change that. That can't be hurt. That can't be taken away. لا يضركم من ضل إذا اهتديتم. Those who are misguided can't hurt you if you are guided. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be adversity in this life, but they can affect your akhirah if you don't let them. They can't change your akhirah. They can't change the next life for you. They can't try to put you in hell when you don't belong there. They can oppose you, they can fight you, they can try to kill you, they may succeed. But ad-darar, in other words, the true harm is not necessarily harm in this life. The true harm is harm that will affect the next life. So if you take a more longitudinal view about how things are going to happen, this life is a short time, few things may happen, but what really is important, what really matters is the next life. So we'll move on to the next hadith, number 12. قال الإمام البخاري رحمه الله عن أسماء قالت: أتيت عائشة وهي تصلي فقلت: ما شأن الناس؟ فأشارت إلى السماء فإذا الناس قيام، فقالت: سبحان الله. قلت: آية؟ فأشارت برأسها: أي نعم. فقمت حتى تجلاني الغشي فجعلت أصب على رأسي الماء، فحمد الله عز وجل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأثنى عليه، ثم قال: ما من شيء لم أكن أريته إلا رأيت في مقامي حتى الجنة والنار، فأوحي إلي أنكم تفتون في قبوركم مثل أو قريبا لا أدري أي ذلك. قالت أسماء: من فتنة المسيح الدجال، يقال: ما علمك بهذا الرجل؟ فأما المؤمن أو الموقن لا أدري بأيهما. قالت أسماء: فيقول: هو محمد رسول الله جاءنا بالبينات والهدى، فأجبنا واتبعنا هو محمد. ثلاثا: فيقال: نم صالحا قد علمنا إن كنت لموقنا. وأما المنافق أو المرتاب لا أدري أي ذلك. قالت أسماء: فيقول: لا أدري، سمعت الناس يقولون شيئا فقلت. Asma said, I came to Aisha while she was praying and said, what is everyone doing? She pointed to the sky and I found all the people standing in prayer. I said, Subhanallah, a sign. She nodded her head, yes. So I too got up for prayer till weariness overcame me. I kept pouring on my head. Then the Prophet ﷺ praised Allah and said, there is nothing I've not been shown that I saw it in this position of mine right now, even heaven and hell. It was revealed to me that you would be tested in your grave, just like the tribulation of the Antichrist. It will be said, what do you know of this man? As for the believer, he will say, this is Muhammad, the messenger of Allah. He came to us with clear proofs and guidance, and we heeded his call and followed him. He is Muhammad. He will be told 3 times, it should say here. He will be told, rest in peace. We know you were of those who had certainty about him. As for the hypocrite, he will say, I don't know. People were saying something, so I said it too. So the incident that actually is referring to what was in the sky was an eclipse of the sun. And so this eclipse actually happened shortly after the death of the son of the Prophet ﷺ, Ibrahim. So initially people had thought it was a type of sign, or it was like the sky showing, the heavens showing its sadness over the death of Ibrahim. And so the Prophet ﷺ said the sky or the heavens don't show sadness over the death of any one person, but he taught them Salat al-Kusuf, which is the eclipse prayer, which is generally like a normal prayer except it's much longer. It involves 1 standing and 2 ruku' and 2 sujood in it. So 1 rak'ah is almost like 2 rak'ahs in some of the schools of thought. And it was narrated the Prophet ﷺ actually read for a very long time, in one narration that he read from the Fatiha, then Al-Baqarah, then and Nisa in that order, then Ali Imran. which would be pretty long. But here, when the Prophet ﷺ said that he has been shown something except he has seen it in this spot right now, means that in that very moment, the Prophet ﷺ had a vision and he saw what heaven and what hellfire looked like. And this also happened in the Isra and Mi'raj, but here this was even an indication of the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even happened in that particular moment that he saw it. So he was standing there and then he saw both of them. And so the ghaib, or the unseen, is something that can be given to anyone, to some knowledge of the unseen. But most particularly for the prophets, and most particularly for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Does the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam know all of the unseen? Does he know all of the ghaib? Did Allah give him knowledge of all of that? Not possible. Why not possible? Because then there would be no distinction between the knowledge of God and the knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Even though he's a prophet, he's still a man and not a God. So Allah can give knowledge of the ghaib, al-ittila' ala al-ghaib. He can give people knowledge of what is unseen, but not everything. And even the Prophet ﷺ indicated there are things that no man knows, like when the hour will come. When the Archangel Gabriel came to him and asked him, Mata as-sa'ah, he said, the one who is asked does not know more than the one who is asking. So indicating he did not know, nor did Gabriel know when the hour would come, when the day of judgment would be coming upon us. No one knows when it will rain. He mentioned this as well. I'm not talking about the weather forecasting, that's a prediction. But no one can say with certainty it will rain here or rain then. No one knows where they're going to die, when they're going to die, and how they're going to die. No one knows that. And that's also from ilm al-ghaib, from the unseen. The certainty of death, yes, but where, how, nobody knows. So the Prophet ﷺ was given some of this knowledge of the ghaib, of the unseen. And also he was given the wahi, the revelation. And the difference between the two, because not all of the ghaib is necessarily the unseen, is revelation in the sense that he has to transmit it. So anything of the wahi that he has been ordered to convey, the Prophet ﷺ has to convey it. And that's one of the attributes of messengerhood, or of being a messenger or epistle to the people, that he has to convey that message. Whereas some of the aspects of ghaib, not necessarily. So there might have been some of the things that the Prophet ﷺ seen, right? Like, for example, he may have known when exactly Laylatul Qadr is. And one of the narrations, it said that he was going to tell them, but then he saw the people bickering and disputing, so he held back. So he told them, look for it in the last 10 odd nights. But he may have known exactly when or how. That may have been in the knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But if it was true wahi, he would have to tell people. He would have to designate it. So anything that he had to convey, from how to do things, legal rulings, halal, haram, had to be conveyed by the Prophet ﷺ. He could not have remained silent about this. But umur al-ghaybiyya, things that are of the unseen, akhbar, things that are yet to happen, or events, in as much as that he was ordered to convey them, he had to convey them. If he was not ordered, he didn't necessarily have to do so. So here he's conveying some of that. So he has seen even paradise and hellfire. And this is a supporting hadith for the idea that paradise and hellfire are created now, exist now. They're in existence. Not that they will be created sometime in the future, but that they're already created. If you read some of the pre-moderns, they talk about how if you go past the 7 heavens and you still keep going, and then eventually you'll find heaven and hell. They didn't mean that build a space shuttle and eventually if you keep going, that you'll get to that point. It's in a realm that may not be reachable by physical, empirical means, but can be seen otherwise. Can people have dreams where they see something in heaven or something in hell? Yeah, it's possible. That their perception of where they are could be something in heaven or something in hell. But it may not necessarily be the actual depiction of it, because dreams are mithal. It's a representation of something else, not necessarily the reality of that thing. So you can even see the Prophet ﷺ in your dream, but he may take on a form that you feel is not his form. But that's based upon you, not based upon him ﷺ. It is him. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I will not appear in a dream except that it is real, it's me, because Satan cannot take my form. However, how you see him, right, that is a different issue about how exactly you may see him in the dream. Because sometimes he'll appear as a mirror of yourself. So sometimes people have dreams where they see the Prophet ﷺ in a way that it's disturbing. That's an indication that it's a sign and a signal to you that's a reflection of yourself and not a reflection of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So anyway, he said, it has been revealed to me that you will be tried and tribulated in your graves in the same manner or close to that of the trial or the tribulation of al-Masih al-Dajjal. So it's generally acknowledged that the most tribulating experience you're ever going to have is the question in the grave. And even when one is in the throes of death, there's a type of fitna called fitnat al-mahya wal-mamat. You know, when one's in the throes of death, this is when there's also a very strong tribulation. From whom? From Satan, of course. Who else is going to be? This is last chance. Right? You're in the throes of death, you're in your deathbed, the moments, minutes, whatever it may be before your soul is taken. He knows there's no other opportunity after this. Once that happens, it's over, game over for him. So people will see and hear things that will be disturbing during that time. He will come with things that will, anything, because he's looking for kufr here. He's not looking for just to lead you astray and make a sin. He wants you to completely fall off. So he'll bring, you know, if someone used to be Christian and then they became Muslim, he'll say things like, maybe you were right before, maybe Jesus died on the cross, maybe he's the Savior, what makes you think this is true? You know, change, it's not too late, so forth. These will some of the things that will come to mind of people when they're in this great tribulation, this great fitna. That's why the adab, the etiquette, if you're with a dying person, don't tell them to say things. Don't address them and say the shahada, say the shahada. Because he has Satan also telling him, say this, say that. So you don't want to be just a voice amongst the voices. But rather you say it yourself. So you say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Don't tell them to say anything, don't instruct them. And also at this time, that you should only let people who are people of khair, people of good, to come in on the person. You don't want someone coming in who's going to ruin the last moments of their life when the angels are gathering around, and angels don't like being around people who are not of blessing and of good. So it's no time to be, to be shy. Someone has been a bad influence or bad detriment, or can, affect them in this last state, then you tell them come later or something. So when they're in the throes of death, it's a great fitna. Then after they pass through death, and then they're buried, another fitna, tribulation happens, which is the tribulation of the grave. So there is a type of chastisement, punishment of the grave. It's said that in the hadith that everyone will go through the initial qabda, which is the constriction of the grave. No one will be saved from this. Some people, though, it will be light. It will not be painful, but the constriction nevertheless will happen. So it's kind of like a wake up. And then in Malakan, the two angels, Munkar and Nakir, is referred to in some of the hadith, will come and ask what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned here. So some of the narrations, not this one, will say, who is your Lord, what is your religion, who is your Prophet? And some of the narrations like this one, you actually see the Prophet ﷺ, because it will say, who is this man? And it will be the Prophet ﷺ. So an image of him or something of that sort will be made manifest, and then you'll be asked about him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.